When my sister said my daughter wasn't real family meow because she wasn't blood, I didn't scream. I didn't beg. I simply said, then we won't be coming. But what I did next? I didn't raise my voice. I raised my silence. And suddenly, I wasn't just the dramatic sister. I was the threat to their precious traditions. They said I was cold, obsessive, that I was isolating myself, but I wasn't isolating, I was protecting. And if loving my daughter fiercely makes me the villain in their story, I'll wear that label with pride, because what they forgot was simple. I've always been the one cleaning up their mess. I'm Harper Davis, 42, eldest of 3 sisters, the default planner, the designated driver, the one who kept the family afloat while everyone else got to drift. When our mom got sick the first time, I was 15, old enough to know what adultification meant, even if I didn't have the vocabulary for it. Bethany was 11, still obsessed with boy bands. Vanessa, barely 6, and already mastering the art of getting out of doing the dishes. I picked up my first part-time job at 16, folding sweaters at the mall, and used half the paycheck to cover groceries. I didn't mind. Not at first. There was a strange power in being needed. At least then, I was visible. Years passed and the roles never quite reset. Bethany became the golden child, the one with the flair, the spotlight, the well-timed engagement photos. Vanessa turned into the quirky one, always forgiven, always adored for her free spirit. And me? I was still the responsible one, still the cleaner-upper. Still the one who got called when someone needed help moving or a ride to the airport or a loan they'd forget to repay. And then came Lena. I adopted her when she was 3 years old. She was tiny, quiet, with these enormous eyes that made you feel like she was cataloging everything for later, which, honestly, she probably was. The first time she called me Mom, I was in the drive-through line at a pharmacy picking up antibiotics for her ear infection. I nearly drove into the curb. From that moment on, I promised her she would always belong, always be chosen. And for 17 years, I kept that promise. Even when my family didn't. It started subtly, like all exclusion does. My mother would refer to her as Harper's little one instead of using her name. Bethany, in her bubbly, performative way, would smile at Lena and say, "You're getting so big," then turn away before waiting for a reply. Vanessa once asked me, while Lena was in the room, "Are you ever going to tell her she's adopted, or are you keeping it a secret?" Lena had been drawing at the kitchen table. She stopped, looked up, and then went back to her sketching without a word. That night, she asked me if secrets made people feel unloved, and I didn't know how to answer. They never said anything cruel, not outright. That's how this kind of harm works. It's quiet. It's polite. It's easy to deny if you call it out. At family parties, Lena would always help with cleanup. She'd carry plates, wipe counters, thank my mother for the food, and every time, no one would respond. Not out of malice, just omission. Just that subtle absence of warmth that says, "You're not really one of us." Once, during Easter brunch, all the grandkids got personalized baskets, hand-painted with their names in cursive. Lena said, "Happy Spring!" No name, no ribbon, just a sticker and a plastic egg. She didn't cry. She smiled and thanked them. That was worse. I began to notice how often I had to translate the world for her, how often I had to soften the blow. Grandma meant well. Aunt Bethany's just tired. Vanessa doesn't always think before she speaks. Excuses, layered over years. And every time, I felt a piece of me quietly shrinking. But the final straw didn't come in a blowout or a betrayal. It came in gold foil. Bethany's wedding invitation arrived in the mail like a crown, wrapped in an envelope, heavy, glossy, scripted to perfection. Lena was excited. She thought it would be a chance to feel included. I opened it on a Thursday afternoon. She was doing homework nearby. Inside, location, attire, RSVP link, and then 2 words that sliced deeper than any insult: adults only. I stared at the words, adults only. 18 plus strictly enforced. No exceptions. My fingers tightened on the edges of the invitation as if I could smooth the message out of existence. Across the kitchen, Lena glanced up from her notebook. "She doesn't want me there," she said softly. I looked at her. 17, nearly grown, smart, kind. The kind of soul you can't fake. "It's a formal wedding," I replied too quickly. "Lots of venues have rules." She didn't blink. "Is it because I'm not really her niece?" That hit like a slow explosion in my chest. I thought back to something my mother said years ago. I had just turned 29. My husband and I were trying for a baby. It had been months of treatments, charting, hoping. And then, one morning, it was gone. A miscarriage. My first and only pregnancy. The silence from my body afterward was deafening. When I told my mother, she clutched my hand, tears in her eyes, and said, "It's okay, sweetheart. Maybe this just wasn't meant for you. Maybe there's another way to fill that hole." Another way. Fill that hole. I didn't think much of it then. Grief fogs everything. But later, years after adopting Lena, I realized she never saw Lena as a beginning. To her, Lena was the patch, a substitute, a quiet apology from fate. It wasn't just my mother, it was all of them. Bethany once joked, at Christmas no less. "It's great how you still got to be a mom, even after all that," Vanessa added, "and without stretch marks. Win-win." I laughed, because that's what I'd learned to do, laugh at the barbs so they wouldn't draw blood in front of Lena. But she wasn't oblivious. One day, when she was 13, I caught her sitting on the stairs, silent. My mother was in the living room talking to Vanessa on speakerphone. They didn't know Lena was listening. "She's sweet," Mom had said, "but you know, she's just a Band-Aid. Harper needed something after the miscarriage. This little one gave her a reason to keep going. She's not family, though," Vanessa replied. "I mean, she doesn't look like us." Lena didn't cry that night. She didn't say a word, but she stopped signing her paintings after that. For almost a year, everything she made was anonymous. I tried to talk to Mom about it once. She brushed it off. "You're too sensitive, Harper. You know we love her. Love her, but not include her." A week after the wedding invite arrived, Bethany hosted a bridal planning brunch. Just the women. Just those closest to her. I came. Lena stayed home. At the table, there were mimosas, Pinterest boards, matching robes already embroidered with initials. Everyone was cheerful, air-kissing and squealing over floral mock-ups. And then someone asked about the guest list. Bethany said, "Oh, we're doing 18 and up only. Super strict. Just to keep it classy." My mother added, "It'll be nice not to have little ones running around." I said nothing. I sat there with a frozen smile while my stomach twisted. They weren't talking about toddlers. They were talking about Lena, a 17-year-old with a 4.0 GPA and more grace than the entire table combined. I didn't ask why. I didn't argue. I just smiled, excused myself early, drove home, and opened the RSVP link on my phone. Clicked not attending. No explanation. No reply to the texts that followed. Just a quiet, steady click. The kind that doesn't shout, but echoes. The RSVP wasn't even cold before the backlash started. Bethany texted first. "Hey, just saw your response. Everything okay?" 5 hours later. "If this is about the age thing, I hope you understand. We're being super consistent. Nothing personal." Nothing personal. That's what they always said when something cut too deep to ignore. Like it wasn't Lena's name that had been left off the group message. Like it wasn't her seat that had been deliberately excluded. I didn't reply. Next came Vanessa. "Wait, you're not coming to the wedding? For real?" "Tessa says it's about the invite." "Harper, don't be like this. You always make things bigger than they are." Then the group chat started bubbling. The one called the Davis Circle. The irony not lost on me. "Mom, I know this isn't ideal, but let's keep the peace. Family comes first, always has." Vanessa. "Exactly. We all make sacrifices. Lena will be okay. She's a tough kid." Bethany, trying to be diplomatic. "I just didn't want to set a precedent. Then everyone would want to bring someone under 18. A precedent. As if my daughter were a policy problem. Still, I said nothing. Not to any of them. Noah, my husband, watched the messages pile up with a clenched jaw. He asked only once, "Do you want me to say something?" I shook my head. He understood the weight of silence. Better than most. See, Noah had once been the family favorite. The charming son-in-law with the easy smile and the Midwestern politeness. He fixed things around Mom's house without being asked. Always brought a bottle of wine to dinners. Remembered birthdays. They adored him. Until he didn't stay in his lane. It was Thanksgiving 3 years ago. Lena was 14. Vanessa's twins had knocked over her art portfolio and laughed, calling it scribble therapy. Lena hadn't said a word, just quietly picked up the scattered pages, cheeks red. No one said anything, not even me. I was in the kitchen, elbows deep in stuffing. But Noah saw it. He stood up in the middle of the dining room and said, "You know, it takes zero effort to teach your kids decency." Silence. Then Mom responded, "Noah, we don't need a lecture during dinner." He didn't back down. Then maybe dinner shouldn't come with cruelty. From that day on, the air shifted. The wine bottles at dinner were accidentally duplicates of ones he hated. The birthday reminders stopped. One time, Mom asked if he could take a family photo, then handed the camera to him and excluded him from the shot. It was subtle, but it was exile, all the same. Now, watching him read the chat, I could see it in his eyes, the same betrayal I'd buried too long. "They're trying to guilt you," he said. I nodded. "They don't think Lena will remember." I looked at him. "She already does." Because Lena wasn't 7. She wasn't a toddler who'd forget. She was a nearly grown woman with the memory of a locked safe and the heart of someone who'd learned the cost of being tolerated, not embraced. I opened the group chat once just to see how far it had gone. Vanessa again. Can't believe Harper's making this all about her again. Lena's not even the only one not coming. Other cousins didn't make the cut either. "Mom, we're still a family. Don't punish your sister over one little detail." One little detail. That's what they always called it. Every omission, every slight, every wound. Just a little detail. Just a moment. Just something Lena would get over. But Lena never cried. And maybe that's what scared me most. The text came on a Tuesday afternoon, mid-meeting, mid-email, mid-life. From Mom, "You need to learn not to let that girl control your emotions. She's not trying to hurt you, Harper, but you're letting her run your life." That girl. Not Lena, not your granddaughter. Just that girl. I didn't respond. I stared at my phone for what felt like hours. I wasn't even angry anymore. Just hollow. Exhausted. Like grief that had gone stale. That night, Lena sat at the kitchen counter, flipping through a cookbook. She asked if we could try baking cinnamon rolls from scratch this weekend. Her voice was light, her smile small but brave. She was trying, pretending. And I played along. I told her yes. I told her they'd turn out better than store-bought. I even made a joke about flour fights. But later, when she was in the shower, I went into her room to put away laundry. That's when I saw the notebook. It was open on her desk, as if she'd been interrupted. Lena was a sketcher. A quiet one. Most of her notebooks were full of trees, shadows, quiet things. But this one had words. Just one page, no drawings, just this. I wasn't born from her blood. Maybe that's why they don't see me. The sentence hit like a blunt object, not because it was new, but because it wasn't. Because she'd held it in long enough to make it sound like fact. I sat down, hand on the notebook, feeling the weight of every one little detail I'd ignored, every look away, every smile that didn't reach their eyes, every moment I'd softened so she wouldn't shatter. I closed the notebook and left her room as it was. The next morning, I deleted the calendar reminder that said, "Holiday planning with Mom, 9 a.m. Zoom." I didn't cancel. I just erased it. And then, one by one, I started removing things. The Pinterest board titled Davis Christmas 2025, the spreadsheet of recipes, the guest list, the seat chart, all gone. I'd started planning in September, like always. I'd blocked out kitchen prep days, labeled serving dishes with sticky notes, even bought new lights because the old ones were too dim for pictures. None of it mattered anymore. Not when Lena thought she had to earn her place. Not when my own mother reduced her to an emotional saboteur. I didn't make a speech. I didn't send an angry text. I didn't rally the troops or write some poetic goodbye. I just stopped. The absence would be louder than anything I could say. Noah noticed the change first. "You're not doing Christmas this year?" he asked gently. I shook my head. He nodded, didn't press. 2 days later, Bethany messaged in the group chat, "Who's bringing dessert to Harpers this year?" Then Vanessa, "Should we arrive the night before again like usual? Want me to bring the folding chairs?" I watched the notifications stack up like pressure behind a dam. Mom followed with, "Let me know what time you want us there. I'll bring the ham." I didn't reply. Neither did Noah. Neither did Lena. The silence swelled. Not awkward, not petty, just intentional. Lena baked test batches of cookies that week. I helped frost them, even though I'm terrible at it. She didn't ask why we weren't shopping for gift wrap in bulk like usual. She didn't ask about the tree or the playlist or the family pajamas. She just watched me, waited. And when I didn't flinch, didn't cave, didn't open that group chat, she smiled. Just a little. Just enough. Christmas morning came like it always did. Soft light through the curtains, the scent of cinnamon and coffee in the air, but without the usual chaos. No buzzing phone, no pre-dawn texts asking if the ham was already in the oven, no knocking at the door, just quiet. It was the first time in 20 years I didn't host, and the house didn't feel empty. Lena was in the kitchen, hair tied back, humming softly as she placed a tray of sugar cookies into the oven. She decorated them with shaky stars and crooked candy canes, her own makeshift icing bags made from Ziploc corners. Noah tuned his guitar on the couch, occasionally strumming warm, lazy chords. Jazz Christmas music played low in the background, but no one was really listening. We didn't need it. I sat on the armchair by the window, reading a book I'd started months ago and never finished. My legs were curled beneath me. My coffee was hot. I wasn't timing anything. I wasn't supervising side dishes or wrangling folding chairs, and for the first hour, I let myself pretend this was normal. Lena offered me a cookie still warm from the oven. It collapsed slightly in the middle, but tasted like peace. She didn't ask if we were doing presents the way we used to, lining them up in order of age, everyone watching one person unwrap at a time. She just handed me a small sketch she'd rolled and tied with string. It was a drawing of our house at night, windows glowing, silhouettes in the kitchen. On the bottom corner, she'd written, "Home is not who knocks on your door. It's who stays inside when everyone else walks away." I nearly cried, not because it was beautiful, though it was, but because it was honest. And then the phone rang. It was in the hallway, the one landline we still had. I stood, half thinking it might be a neighbor or one of Noah's relatives calling to wish us well. But the screen flashed, "Mom." I didn't answer. I just stood near it, waiting for the voicemail. She didn't leave one. But 30 minutes later, I passed the guest bedroom and heard Noah's old phone ringing. It had been left on the desk, still plugged in for emergencies, connected to our shared family plan. I didn't mean to listen. I didn't mean to eavesdrop. But the voice echoed from the speaker. "Mom." She must have called Vanessa and not realized she was on speaker. "She'll come around," Mom said, her voice clipped. "Harper just wants attention, always has." There was a pause, the clinking of dishes in the background. "She thinks she's proving a point, but she'll crawl back. She always does." Another pause. Vanessa snorted. "When Lena leaves for college, she'll come running." And then Mom, the kicker. "Honestly, I'm not even mad. I'm just sad she's throwing away real family over a stand-in." I felt like I'd been pushed underwater. A stand-in. That's what they called my daughter. A place filler, a prop. I backed away from the room before I could hear more. My hands were cold. My chest felt tight. I walked into the kitchen. Lena was cleaning up flour from the counter. She looked up and smiled. "Want to decorate more?" I nodded. Because right then, I couldn't speak. Not without breaking something, but I could squeeze icing onto misshapen cookies. I could swirl red and green into frosting while my daughter, my real daughter, laughed beside me, and that would be enough. 2 days after Christmas, Bethany posted a carousel of wedding photos on Instagram, all warm-toned edits and forced laughter, like a lifestyle magazine spread curated by someone who didn't know what warmth really felt like. There were shots of her and her husband twirling under fairy lights, group photos in front of a floral arch, and candid moments with Vanessa dabbing at her eyes mid-speech. It all looked so perfect, so sterile. The kind of curated joy you could only find in well-lit lies. But it was the caption that turned my stomach. Family isn't who raises you, it's who shows up. For a second, I thought maybe she was talking about Mom, about our childhood, about how I was the one who packed her lunches, braided her hair, walked her to school while Mom was too tired or too busy or just absent. And maybe that would have hurt less. But I knew what she meant. It was aimed at me, because I hadn't shown up, because I'd said no, because I didn't hand over my daughter on a silver platter and let them pretend she didn't exist for the sake of aesthetic cohesion. The comments started flooding in, mostly friends and distant relatives. So beautiful, obsessed with this love. Such a powerful caption. Preach. Glad you got the day you deserved. I didn't react, didn't like, didn't comment. But I saw Lena standing in the hallway later, her phone in her hand, screen glowing just enough to light her expressionless face. She didn't speak. She didn't ask for interpretation. She just locked her phone and walked past me into the kitchen like she hadn't just read a veiled attack on her existence. She was learning, not how to ignore pain, but how to tuck it inside. That's what scared me most. Later that night, I found her sketchpad open on the table. She'd drawn a girl standing in the rain, umbrella torn, surrounded by silhouettes holding matching ones, perfect and dry. The girl in the center was colored in muted browns, her face blank. Around her, the silhouettes had no faces, but each wore a sash that read, "Blood." And beneath the drawing in the corner, small and tight, "Showing up for who?" I stared at it for a long time, not because I didn't understand, but because I did, because my daughter, my bright, beautiful, resilient daughter, was beginning to believe that her absence in their world wasn't just tolerated, it was preferred. I used to think the worst thing they could do was hurt her. Now I know better. The worst thing they ever did was forget her, not just in birthday cards or seating charts, but in intention, in memory, in love. They forgot that she was watching, that every moment they turned their back, she was still standing there, quiet, hopeful, waiting, and she learned, not how to heal, but how to disappear quietly enough that no one would notice she'd been erased. That night, Noah and I sat on the couch, not speaking. The Christmas lights still blinked on the mantel, though no one had turned them off. The house smelled of pine and sugar, and Lena's sketch still sat on the table in view. Noah finally said, "She's shutting down." I nodded. She thinks it's her fault. She's 17. And she's already had to carry more rejection than most people face in a lifetime. He rubbed his hand over his face. We can't change them. No, I agreed. But we can stop pretending they'll change for her. That's when I made the decision. No more hoping. No more, maybe next time. No more softening the truth to keep the family machine running. We weren't broken because we missed a Christmas or skipped a wedding. We were broken because somewhere along the way, their love became conditional. And my love, it never was. Silence unsettled them more than confrontation ever could. The group chat turned from passive to aggressive within a week of Christmas. At first, it was guilt-tripped softness. Mom, we missed Lena this year. I saved her a gift. She'll love it. Vanessa, why punish her, Harper? She didn't ask for this drama. Bethany, she's just a kid. Don't drag her into adult things. Then it shifted. Vanessa, wow, still no response? Classy. Mom, I never thought you'd throw away your entire family over pride. Bethany, she's 17. She'll be off to college soon. Are you going to isolate yourself forever? I didn't reply, but I did start screenshotting. Every single one. I created a folder on my desktop called Receipts for Lena, because I knew one day she might ask, not just what happened, but why I didn't fight harder, and I wanted to show her. I did, just not with yelling, with truth. The texts kept coming. One from my dad, rare for him. Your mother hasn't slept well in weeks. We know this isn't who you are. That one hurt, because it was. It was who I'd become. Someone who finally drew a line in the sand. Someone who didn't mistake blood for love. One afternoon, after yet another ping from the group chat, I sat on the porch with Noah, sipping lukewarm tea. The air was crisp, the kind of cold that made silence feel sacred. He watched me scroll and save another message. You documenting the war? He asked, half smiling. I nodded. I don't want them to rewrite it later. He was quiet for a moment, then said, my mom went through this. I looked at him, startled. She was disowned by her family, he said, back in Ohio. She adopted my older brother before I was born. He was 4, I think. My eyes widened. You never told me that. She didn't talk about it much, said it wasn't worth remembering people who chose absence over acceptance. What happened? He leaned back in his chair, the wood creaking. They called her unfit, said taking in someone else's mistake wasn't natural. She wrote them letters for years, birthday cards, updates, never got a reply. Eventually, she stopped. Burned the address book. I swallowed hard. Did it break her? No, he said. It refined her. She stopped wasting love on people who treated it like currency. I sat with that for a while, then asked, did she ever regret it? He shook his head. She used to say, the ones who leave you for doing the right thing were never really with you to begin with. We sat in silence, the wind rustling dry leaves at our feet. I thought about Lena, how she was already learning that family wasn't always sanctuary, that sometimes it was the battlefield, that the people who were supposed to protect you were the ones who threw the first stone. But I also thought about Noah's mom, about the quiet power of someone who refuses to beg for love. And I decided, if Lena ever had to choose between pleasing others or protecting her peace, I wanted her to remember this moment. The porch, the cold, the stillness, the way her mother didn't fold. Inside, my phone lit up again. Vanessa, are you even going to acknowledge us anymore? I took a deep breath, saved the message, turned the phone face down, and smiled, because when silence screams louder than all their noise, that's when they finally start to hear. The invitation came in the mail the week after New Year's, a glossy envelope with metallic trim and an elegant font, the kind of formal flourish Vanessa loved to overuse. It was addressed to Harper Davis and guest inside. The card read, you are cordially invited to our annual year-end dinner, an evening of gratitude, family, and new beginnings. There was a note scribbled in the margin in Vanessa's sharp handwriting. Hope you and Lena can make it. Would love to see her. It was the first time in over a year that Lena had been explicitly acknowledged in any invitation. For a second, my heart stuttered. A crack? A softening? I set it on the counter, just as Lena walked into the kitchen. Something from Aunt Vanessa? She asked, voice flat. I handed her the envelope. She read it slowly, eyes scanning the embossed details, lips slightly pursed. Then she tilted the card toward the light. There, at the bottom, where RSVP information was listed, was a pre-printed line, Harper Davis and one guest. The one guest was underlined, not handwritten, not personalized, just templated, as if Lena were an accessory, not a person, a placeholder, a contingency. She stared at the line for a long moment, then looked up and said, without any venom, without any sarcasm, "They want me invisible again." And there it was, the resignation, the knowledge, the quiet internal calculation that told her she wasn't worth even the smallest correction on a printer setting. I didn't rush to fix it, didn't say, "I'm sure it's a mistake," because it wasn't. They'd made a choice. Again. I picked up the card, snapped a photo with my phone, and opened the group chat. Attached the image, wrote one word, noted, and hit send. I didn't wait for the replies, didn't want to see the excuses, the faux outrage, the predictable chorus of, "Don't take it personally." Because I did take it personally. Because Lena was personal. Because for years I had covered their mistakes with generosity, had folded their indifference into explanations like tissue paper around something fragile, until I realized the only thing fragile was the lie I kept telling myself, that they meant no harm. But harm doesn't have to be loud to be lethal. Sometimes it looks like a line of text that forgets your daughter's name. Lena didn't cry. She didn't storm off or retreat to her room. She just nodded and went back to cleaning her paintbrushes at the sink. The sun lit her profile, catching in her curls. She looked older suddenly, more self-contained, like someone who had already grieved and buried a hope that no longer served her. That night, Noah found me sitting on the porch again. He handed me a mug of hot cider and said, "So?" Vanessa reached out directly. I raised an eyebrow. "She texted me," he clarified. "Said she hopes we don't let a printing error ruin a chance at healing." I laughed, once, dry. "That wasn't a printing error." "I know. She wants credit for opening the door, but won't even sweep the porch." He sipped his drink and didn't argue. Later, I checked the group chat. Dozens of unread messages. "Vanessa, it was an honest mistake. I even hand-wrote a note. You're looking for reasons to be mad. Bethany, I'm tired of walking on eggshells around Harper. We're trying here." "Mom, she included Lena, that's what matters." But it didn't. Inclusion isn't an afterthought, it's the starting point, and they still hadn't learned that. I closed the app, tossed the invitation in the recycling bin, and went to sit beside my daughter, who was sketching under a blanket on the couch. "Do you want to go?" I asked, even though I already knew the answer. She didn't look up. "No," she said. "I'd rather be invisible somewhere else." It happened on a gray Thursday afternoon, the kind where time feels slow and the world folds into itself. Snow hadn't fallen, but the air hinted at it, sharp, weighty, expectant. Lena was upstairs painting. Noah was still at work. And then the doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone. I wiped my hands on a dish towel, walked slowly to the front door, and pulled it open. There they were. My parents. Mom held a Tupperware container, her oatmeal cookies soft in the middle, burnt on the edges, the kind she used to make when we were little. Dad stood beside her, hands tucked in his coat pockets, looking like he was auditioning for patience. "Harper," Mom said with that breathy voice she reserved for delicate occasions. We were in the neighborhood. A lie. They lived an hour away. I didn't move from the doorway. She held out the cookies like a peace offering. "We just wanted to talk. Maybe come in for a few minutes?" I glanced at the container. The lid was slightly ajar. "About what?" Dad cleared his throat. "Let's not do this out here." "Why not?" I asked calmly. "We're already standing in the cold." Mom gave a small, tight smile. "We miss you." "We miss Lena," Dad added. The word tasted like irony coming from him. "I read your texts," I said. "Every one of them." Mom's smile tightened further. "I know things got a little heated, but we're family. We shouldn't let one disagreement define us." "One?" I echoed. "She's a teenager," Mom continued. "And you've always been the sensitive one. But this time, Harper, it's gone too far." There it was. The reset. The subtle return to the narrative where I was the problem, the one who took things too personally, the one who ruined holidays by asking to be seen. I stayed quiet. "She'll leave soon," Dad said. "Off to college. You'll be alone. You'll regret pushing everyone away." Mom stepped forward slightly. "We've been patient, Harper. We gave you space. But this? You're going to lose your real family over a girl who won't even be here in a few months?" The words hit harder than expected, not because they were new, but because she said them like a truth, like a kindness. "She's not your blood," Mom said softly. "She's not really one of us." Silence stretched between us like a snapped wire. I didn't scream. I didn't slam the door. I didn't even raise my voice. I stepped back just enough for clarity, not invitation. "You need to leave," I said. "Harper," Dad started. "No," I interrupted, still calm. "You don't get to come here with cookies and pretend this is kindness. You don't get to insult my daughter and then ask to be let inside." Mom's lips trembled. "You'll regret this. When she leaves you, when she forgets about you, you'll come back. You'll see." I didn't answer, didn't explain, didn't try to win them over. I simply reached for the door and closed it. The click of the lock felt louder than any slam. I stood behind the door for a long moment, heart pounding, not out of fear, but out of grief. The kind of grief that comes when you realize the people who raised you were never truly ready to love the parts of you that refused to shrink. Upstairs, Lena's music played faintly. The house smelled like acrylic paint and cinnamon. It smelled like us. And that was enough. That night, Lena sat at the dining table, her legs tucked under her, sketchbook open but untouched. The lamplight caught the side of her face, softening the sharp lines she rarely let anyone see. She didn't look up when she spoke. "If I messed up," she said, almost whispering, "like really messed up one day, would you give me back?" The question lodged itself in my throat. I set down my mug and looked at her. "What makes you ask that?" She shrugged, eyes still fixed on her blank page. "I was just thinking, maybe if I was bad enough, you'd finally agree with them." It took everything I had not to shatter. "Lena," I said quietly, "you could rob a bank, set fire to the kitchen, tattoo your entire face, and you'd still be mine. There is nothing you could do to unbelong." She finally looked at me. "But they think I don't." I nodded, not because she needed confirmation, but because she deserved the truth. And so I told her everything. About the cookies on the porch, about her grandmother's words, about how they saw her as a failed healing project, a Band-Aid that didn't stick. She didn't interrupt, didn't blink much. She just listened, jaw clenched, hands folded tightly in her lap. When I finished, there was a long silence between us, not cold, just full. Then she said softly but firmly, "Then they never knew what love was." It wasn't bitter. It wasn't angry. It was clarity. And something in me exhaled. Later that night, after she went to bed, I sat at the kitchen counter and pulled out a sheet of paper. Not a text, not an email, something that couldn't be dismissed with a swipe or ignored with a read receipt. I wrote to my parents, "Dear Mom and Dad, this isn't a letter of anger. You've seen enough of that. It's not even a letter of hurt. I've sat in that for years, and it no longer surprises me. This is a letter of certainty. I'm not coming back. Not to the holidays. Not to the group chats. Not to the lukewarm invitations with strings attached. And it's not because of Lena. It's because of me. Because I've spent decades reducing myself to keep peace, to earn a seat at your table, to be the good daughter who sacrifices without being asked and forgives without being offered an apology. Because I've watched my child smile through omissions, through cold silences, dressed up as traditions, through being almost, but never quite, part of your narrative. And I won't do that anymore. You called her a placeholder, a phase, a failed attempt at filling a space, but she's never been a placeholder in this home. She is the home. I am proud of the girl who grew up learning how to stay kind in rooms that never clapped for her. I am in awe of the young woman who didn't need your acceptance to still offer grace. And I will never again stand beside her in rooms that pretend she doesn't exist. You say I'll regret walking away, but I've walked towards something better. Peace, authenticity, a love that doesn't need to be diluted for your comfort. Please don't reply. Not unless it's different, not unless it's real. Harper. I folded the letter, sealed it, and left it by the door. I'd send it in the morning. No delay, no second guessing. Upstairs, I could hear Lena's low humming through the vent, a tune she always fell asleep to. It wasn't cheerful. It wasn't sad. It was steady. Just like her. For years, I'd waited for my family to see her the way I did, to recognize her brilliance, her quiet strength, her relentless gentleness. Now I realized it didn't matter. She saw herself, and that was more than enough. The fallout didn't come in the way you'd expect, not through a phone call, not even through a family dinner confrontation. It arrived like everything else in our family, hidden behind politeness, dressed in civility. Vanessa sent out an email to our extended relatives. She titled it, "Clarifying the Situation, a Sanitized War Declaration." The message, nearly 4 paragraphs long, was laced with saccharine concern and razor-sharp judgment. She talked about how sad it was that things had spiraled out of control, how I'd become increasingly isolated, how my daughter, she didn't use Lena's name, was exerting an unhealthy level of influence over my choices. "She's not a bad girl," Vanessa wrote, "but Harper has lost perspective. She's confusing protection with obsession." Obsession. That word lodged under my ribs, and the last sentence was the dagger. We all want what's best for Harper, but right now she is lost, and it's painful to watch her choose exclusion over healing. By the time I read the message, I'd already received 3 texts from distant cousins. "Hey, just checking in. Everything okay? Did something happen with Lena? Vanessa said you might need space. Want to talk?" The second text made me want to laugh and scream at the same time. Something happened with Lena? No, something happened to her. I didn't reply. Not yet. Instead, I opened the folder on my computer. Receipts for Lena? I added a screenshot of the email, highlighted the phrases unhealthy influence, lost perspective, and obsession. I wasn't hoarding these things out of spite. I was documenting them for truth, because one day, Lena might wonder if she imagined it all, the erasure, the manipulation, the way they twisted love into a conditional contract. I wanted her to know she hadn't. Noah sat beside me that evening, reading through the email silently. When he reached the final paragraph, he muttered, "They're building a case." "I know, but not against you," he said, "against her." And that's what made my stomach turn, because that's what it was. A slow character assassination. Not loud enough to spark outrage, but steady enough to make people question. Maybe Harper overreacted. Maybe the girl really is difficult. Maybe there's another side to this. That's what manipulation thrives on. Maybes. 2 days later, I received a private message from Aunt Gloria, my father's older sister. She was never close to any of us, the kind of relative who floated between weddings and holidays, but rarely inserted herself. Her message was simple. "Not sure if you've seen this. Thought you should." Attached was a photo, an invitation. "Bethany and Daniel, join us for a celebration of love and family. Formal attire, adults only." But there, at the bottom corner in faint print, barely visible under the RSVP instructions, was a line of text, italicized, underlined, "No foster children allowed." I stared at it for so long, my vision blurred. There it was, in writing, proof, not hearsay, not an assumption, a quiet policy baked into their version of perfection. They didn't forget Lena. They excluded her, deliberately, logically, coldly. I printed the image, folded it, tucked it into the back of Lena's sketchbook. Not for her to find now, but one day, when the memory of this season blurred and she needed to remember why we left. And for the first time since this all began, I felt calm. Not relieved, not vindicated, just steady. Because the truth, when laid bare, doesn't scream. It simply stands. I waited 3 days, not out of hesitation, but out of precision. I wanted no emotion clouding what I was about to do. No heat, no spite, no trembling hands, just facts. I opened a blank email, addressed it to every extended family member on that email Vanessa had so graciously CC'd me into. I removed her from the recipients list. The subject line was simple. For the record, for Lena. I attached a PDF file I'd spent the last 24 hours assembling, 78 pages, each page with timestamps, each one labeled and categorized. Section 1, Wedding Invitation Photos, close-up of the No Foster Children Allowed line. Section 2, Screenshots from the family group chat, comments like, "She's not really family, you always overreact, you'll regret it when she leaves." Section 3, Vanessa's email. Section 4, the RSVP image with Harper and one guest underlined. Section 5, comments under Bethany's Instagram post. Family is who shows up. Section 6, Lena's drawings, anonymous but dated, visuals of exclusion, silence, shadows. Section 7, my letter to Mom and Dad, scanned and included exactly as I'd written it. No introduction, no summary, no argument. Just this in the body of the email. This is not for sympathy. This is not for drama. This is for clarity. Lena deserves to know she wasn't crazy, and I deserve to know I didn't stay silent. No response is necessary. No defense is needed. The truth stands without permission. Harper. I hit send. Closed the laptop, then walked outside and sat on the porch with a blanket over my legs. The air had warmed slightly, as if even January needed to exhale. I didn't wait for replies, because I wasn't looking for validation. I was reclaiming the narrative. By the next day, I saw the ripple. Mom left me a voicemail, a hesitant voice full of tremble and pauses. I didn't realize. Maybe we should have... I didn't call back. One of my cousins, Rachel, replied with a short message. I'm sorry, I really didn't know how bad it got. I unfriended Vanessa. If you ever want to talk... I didn't. Another cousin simply wrote, I've got a daughter now. Reading this changed how I see things. Thank you. Some relatives unsubscribed from the family newsletter. Others went quiet. Vanessa never responded, which meant she read it, and that was enough. But the most important thing happened 2 days later. Lena walked into my room holding the printed PDF. Her hands were ink-stained. Her cheeks were blotchy. She didn't speak for a long time, just sat on the edge of my bed and stared at the floor. Then she said, You didn't have to do this. I looked at her. Yes, I did. I thought it was just me, she whispered. I thought maybe I was imagining how invisible I felt. You weren't. She blinked rapidly, then nodded, almost to herself. You didn't yell. You didn't throw things. You just showed them. Sometimes silence isn't peace, I said. It's armor. She looked at me for a long moment, then reached into her hoodie pocket and pulled out a small folded sketch, handed it to me. It was a drawing of me, standing in front of a wall of noise, messages, mouths, social media captions. Behind me, she stood in shadow, and I was holding her hand. There were no captions, no names, just this tiny line scrawled at the bottom. She didn't raise her voice. She raised me. The house felt quieter now, but not empty. Lena had moved into her college dorm 3 months earlier, an arts program she'd worked toward for years, the kind that only took 20 students a year, the kind that made her eyes sparkle when the acceptance letter arrived. She still called every night, sometimes just to say hi, sometimes to ask for help unclogging her paintbrushes, sometimes to cry quietly when deadlines got too loud, but always she called. Her number lit up my phone every evening at 9:03 p.m., like clockwork, and I never missed a call. Noah and I had settled into a rhythm too. We cooked smaller meals, took longer walks, reclaimed rooms we used to fill with people who barely looked us in the eye. There were no more group chats, no more last-minute grocery runs for family gatherings that left me feeling like a guest in my own life. This year, we hosted our second Christmas for 3. We lit the fireplace, opened presents in pajamas, made cinnamon rolls from scratch. Lena's recipe. She'd mailed us a jar of her homemade cranberry jam with a note, for the table that never made me shrink. The living room echoed with laughter. Noah played acoustic renditions of classic carols on guitar, occasionally inventing lyrics that made me snort hot cider through my nose. We didn't talk about them. We didn't need to. They had become a closed chapter, important for the plot, but no longer part of the page we lived on. The day after Christmas, a letter arrived. Real paper. Handwritten envelope. It was addressed to me. The return name was Ms. Garnett, Lena's high school English teacher. I sat at the kitchen table to open it, the same spot Lena used to finish her homework, elbows splayed, earbuds half in. Dear Mrs. Davis, I hope this letter finds you well, and a little less tired than I remember you during finals season last year. I wanted to write because something happened during the college application process that I feel you deserve to know. For one of her admissions essays, Lena was asked to write about the person who most impacted her life. Most students chose celebrities. A few wrote about grandparents or siblings. Lena wrote about you. The essay was titled, "The Person Who Saved My Life by Staying." She didn't tell me she was adopted until I read it. She never complained, never played the victim. She simply described the quiet kind of love, the kind that doesn't need to be loud to be life-changing. She wrote about nights you stayed up to help her through panic attacks, about how you showed up to every parent-teacher meeting, even the ones that didn't require a parent, about the time you sat with her for 2 hours just to help her get through her first public speech. She said, "She never treated me like a second chance. She treated me like a first priority. I've been teaching for 17 years, Mrs. Davis. I've read hundreds of essays, but that one stayed with me. I just thought you should know. You didn't just raise a good kid. You built a future with both hands and both feet planted in a house that refused to abandon her. I hope you're proud, because you should be. Warmly, Ms. Allison Garnett." The letter trembled slightly in my hands by the time I finished. I didn't cry, I just smiled. Because I wasn't surprised. Not really. Lena had always known. Even when the world tried to write her out, she wrote me in, and that was more than enough. That night, after the laughter faded and Noah went to bed, I found myself alone in the kitchen, a cup of tea growing cold in my hands. The house still smelled faintly of cinnamon and pine. Lena's voice still echoed in my mind from our earlier call, and yet something stirred beneath the peace, a memory. That day on the porch, my mother holding out the Tupperware of oatmeal cookies, her smile tight and hands trembling, waiting for me to say, "It's okay," waiting for me to pretend, waiting for me to unlock the door like I always had. I remember the sharp, cold air, how my fingers curled into fists in my coat pockets. I remember her words, gentle in tone, brutal in message. "She's not your blood. She's not really one of us. You'll regret this." I'd closed the door on her, and some nights I still heard the echo of that lock clicking in my head, loud, final, defiant. Tonight I found myself whispering the question I'd refused to ask for months. Did I do the right thing? Not for Lena, for me. Because protecting Lena had never been in question. I'd do it again, and again, and again. But choosing me, the version of myself that didn't need to keep bending to be loved, was the harder part. I stood, walked down the hallway, and opened the hall closet. Inside, buried beneath old linens and wrapping paper, was a flat cardboard box. Lena's artwork archive, every sketch, every doodle, every card she'd ever given me. I pulled it out and sat on the living room floor. At the bottom of the stack was the first drawing she ever made for me. She was 5. She'd used 3 markers, brown, blue, and orange. The proportions were off. My arms were too long. Her feet were missing entirely. The sun had a frown instead of a smile, which she later told me was by accident, but maybe also on purpose. The 2 stick figures stood in front of a crooked house. She'd written Mom and Me in shaky letters across the top. I'd kept it all this time, but I'd never framed it, never hung it, because I thought it wasn't polished enough, because it was bent in one corner, because it looked like what it was, a beginning, not a masterpiece. But tonight I saw it differently. It was the first time she called me Mom, not out loud, but in ink. The first time she made our story real. I stood, took the tape from the drawer, and walked over to the hallway wall, the one across from her childhood bedroom where we used to pin her report cards and birthday party invites. I pressed the drawing to the wall and smoothed it flat. It was uneven, a little faded, but it was hers. Not perfect, not polished, but mine. And I realized that's exactly what this life had become. Not tidy, not symmetrical, not what I imagined when I was a girl dreaming of family, but honest and whole and entirely ours. I stepped back and looked at the crooked little son, the missing feet, the smiling stick figure holding my hand, and I knew. I didn't regret closing that door. I didn't regret the silence. I didn't regret choosing her over holiday traditions, over group chats, over bloodlines wrapped in shame. If they were still waiting for me to crawl back, to beg for a seat at the table I used to set with shaking hands, let them wait, because I already came home. The moment I chose her,